Hi, I'm Jacqueline.
And I'm Courtney, and this is Caffeinated Crimes.
And here we are again in some month. It is December now, as you're hearing this. I thought we were already in December last week, but we were not. But here we are now. But we are going to keep this concise because, one, we've done a lot of rambling the last few weeks, and it's taken us quite a while to get to the episode. And also, two, Courtney's losing her voice, and so don't want her to run out of steam by the end of the episode. So,
Yeah, it's weird. With the pandemic, I was very careful, and so I haven't been sick in like 2 years. So I kind of forgot how much it sucked to be sick like every winter. So my voice I think is okay right now. I've consumed a lot of fluid, a lot of warm stuff. I've taken medicine. I have a cough drop for when I'm not talking. So I think I'm sounding okay right now. The best I've sounded today. So we're going to do this.
we are recording after the Sunday football games, so Courtney had to contain herself and not yell too much, which can be very difficult, so hopefully she managed to do that okay.
I think after the first quarter, I kind of just shut down. I was like,
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, I mean, I'm just over here drinking my victory champagne because the Bengals just demolished the Steelers this week, which was just beautiful. I mean,
Mwah, chef's kiss.
yes, it was fantastic. Just anyway. So we hope you guys had a wonderful Thanksgiving, which I think we already said last week, but now we have had Thanksgiving and it was wonderful. So hopefully yours was too. But we do have some updates to get into before we do today's episode. So as you will remember, in February of 2020, Ahmaud Arbery was running through his neighborhood in Brunswick, Georgia, when he was hunted down and murdered by 3 white men. So that was Travis McMichael, Gregory McMichael, and William Bryan. And this past week, they were all found guilty on multiple counts for his murder. And as you'll remember, the public wasn't even aware of this until the video went viral a month later. So basically no charges were filed until the video went viral and people were outraged and started calling for them to be arrested. So if that video had not come forward, if there was not this public outcry, they probably would not have even gone to trial because they claimed it was self-defense when they hunted down this man who was just running through a neighborhood, who had done nothing because they believed that he was the man responsible for recent robberies. So.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that the DA was like trying to get them off too. Like I think I saw something that they're kind of trying to push for possible charges against them because it was like,
yeah.
I don't want to say like covering it up, but literally was just trying to be like, nope, forget it. When, and I've been like talking and like my not my favorite part of this, but the part that just like baffles me is that this video was released because William Bryan thought like it would prove their innocence. Like that is why that video came out. It says he was like, I have a video. Look, I told you. And people are like, I'm sorry, what?
Like, it's even worse than we thought it was. Thank you for that. It truly is just like mind-boggling that they were like, oh, like I'm clearly in the right. Like, here, watch this video of me hunting down this man for no reason. Cool. But yeah, so thankfully that video did come out. People were like, okay, no, this is not okay. You need to do something about this. Because of that, these men were arrested, have now been convicted. So they have not had sentencing yet, but the prosecutors are saying that they are aiming for life without parole. They are also awaiting federal charges for a hate crime, possibly, because they were indicted for that in April, and that trial is expected to begin in February. So they may have additional charges, longer sentencing, or, like really sticking to that life without parole, depending on what happens with those charges. So, we never want to say justice has been served because you can't bring Ahmaud back, you can't give him back to his family, but we are glad that in this case, someone was held legally accountable for his murder.
Yeah, like I know his mom in interviews was like, he can like rest in peace now because who did this to him like is in jail. So
yeah,
it's definitely a big win for them, especially when there was a time they might not have even gotten charged.
Yeah,
So.
for sure.
And we do have one more update, and this is kind of a crazy one, and one that I've not heard about really much at all. My supervisor at work actually sent it to me and was like, have you heard about this? Like, I saw it on TikTok, and then I looked it up, and it's like, no one's talking about it. So I was a woman named Cassidy Rainwater, and she'd been missing since mid-July in Missouri. And eventually her remains were found, and two men, James Phelps and Timothy Norton, have been charged with her murder. And she had been kept in a cage, they believe, and some of her remains were found in the freezer in a bag marked 724, which is gross. Which also leads me to believe, like, this isn't your first time. Like, that feels very thought out, maybe.
Like, why do you need a date on something to, like label it, to remind you to, like, why else would you put that there?
Yeah, like, do you know how long, like, human flesh stays good in the freezer or something? Like, no more than 6 months? Like, what? I don't know. The police also failed to protect the crime scene, and someone did eventually burn down the house, so any more evidence is officially lost. And another little part of this case that's weird is Cassidy's mom had also been previously missing, and her remains were found in a field. So it seems very fishy to me. It doesn't really seem like a first time thing. I really find it weird that her mom just mysteriously went missing, and she was also found dead. It looks like the sheriff, the detective, prosecutor is very unhappy with the public putting their thought into it, because he had talked about how people were talking about it on social media, and he's like, all these like true crime people like sit on their couch with their off-brand Cheez-Its or whatever and speculate about what happened, and they don't know anything, and it just felt weird. So I'm like, are you covering up something here too? Like,
first of all, sir, I've never bought off-brand Cheez-Its, but
that's a rookie mistake.
Which, like, I understand as an investigator being frustrated if people are like, oh, here's all this stuff that's not true, or they're like, oh, well, clearly it was this, and they don't have all of the information, and so on and so forth. I understand that, but to go to the level of, like, making a statement like that specific, like, really, like, digging into, that just seems a little off.
Especially because we have seen in the past, like, web sleuths and people in the true crime community, like, can help. But yeah, I guess we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, I just think it's crazy that, like, no one's talking about it, and so hopefully this will get some more news, some more media, and, like, hopefully James Phelps and Timothy Norton are going to prison for life.
Yes, for sure. So, to get into today's case, our sources were the Missing on 9/11 podcast, an Independent article, and a New York Post article. Dr. Sneha Anne Philip has been listed as a victim of the 9/11 terrorist attack in New York City, but was she actually there, or is her disappearance something more sinister? Sneha was always described as brilliant, beautiful, artistic, charismatic, and forceful. Some would call her manipulative, but she was really good at getting what she wanted or needed. She spoke 5 languages: English, Russian, Italian, German, and Malayalam, which I've never heard of. So, but that's pretty cool. It's like
an Indian language, I believe.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, anyone who can speak more than one language is just so impressive.
Yeah.
Much less 5 of them. She loved books and enjoyed philosophy and poetry. She grew up in a very conservative Indian family, but she described herself as progressive, and she considered herself a feminist. She was 5'6" and 115 pounds, so she was a smaller person, but she was just very fierce. Like, everyone really described her as this, like, force, you know? Sneha was born on October 7th, 1969, in southwest India in the state of Kerala. She had an older brother, Ashwin, and 3 years later, her father won a visa lottery for doctors and moved the family to Albany, New York. So 3 years after this, her younger brother, John, was born. So Sneha attended Leadenville Christian School and later Emma Willard School. So Emma Willard School is an exclusive academy. Jane Fonda actually went there as well. So, like, it's a pretty, like, you know,
prestigious school. Yeah.
Yes, that's the word I'm looking for. You guys can't see my hand movements like Courtney can. For some reason, the podcast just doesn't pick that up. So Sneha ran track and played flute and piano. She loved Audrey Hepburn and listening to Boy George and Duran Duran. And in 1987, she graduated from Emma Willard and moved to Baltimore to attend Johns Hopkins University, where she pursued pre-med and creative writing studies. So just like, wow. Like, this woman is just doing so much stuff. Sneha's family says that she really wanted to become a doctor, but a lot of her friends and other people who knew her said that wasn't really true, that she actually wanted to be an artist. So it may have been this family pressure, especially as we see a lot from children of immigrants, that they really feel pushed to pursue, medicine, law,
Lawyer.
these like, yep.
Yeah, these like very prestigious, like top, things like that. And like being an artist is like, oh, okay, no, you can't do that. You gotta be a doctor.
Exactly. Yeah. So she may have wanted to be a doctor, but a lot of people are like, she had these other like creative things that she wanted to pursue as well. But she did graduate from Johns Hopkins in May of 1991, and by 1993, she was living in Seattle, where she took classes at the University of Washington. She loved fashion, especially shoes and dancing, and she attended a lot of raves there. And in the summer of 94, she moved east to go to the Chicago Medical School, and this is where she met Ron Lieberman in 1996. So he was a long-haired Jewish musician from Los Angeles. He was very skinny and played the guitar. And sometime after that, in 96 or 97, Sneha took a year off from med school. So she went to Tuscany, Italy, and spent 6 to 7 months painting. And she just absolutely loved living there and could even see herself living there permanently. She really wondered if she wanted to be a doctor or an artist. So she's going through this, identity crisis at this point of, do I want to live and paint in Italy, or do I want to go back and finish this career that I've been pursuing of becoming a doctor? So while in Tuscany, Ron proposed and she said yes. So she then decided to return to Chicago to finish med school. And in 1999, Sneha and Ron graduated and moved to New York City. And that July, they both started their residencies and they got married on May 13th, 2000. So now we're going to detail the last day that Sneha was seen. So there's going to be a lot of times and locations, but they're really important to her disappearance. So that's why we're going to cover so many details. So on September 10th, 2001 at 10:30 a.m., Sneha is in Manhattan Criminal Court charged with assault, harassment, and falsely reporting an incident. So a few months prior, she told police that a fellow doctor sexually assaulted her in a bar. Then, according to the NYPD, she recanted and proceeded to harass the doctor and his wife. So her family believes that this incident really caused her just to go down this downward spiral. So Ron and her attorney are with her at court today. So her case is adjourned until a future date. So what happens next is disputed. So according to an NYPD detective, while leaving the courthouse, Sneha and Ron got into an argument. But Ron says this never happened. Sneha's attorney says that he does not remember this happening. So he said, she said here, don't really know, but it's one theory or one statement that came forward. So sometime between 10:30 and 11:30 a.m., Ron and Sneha walked the mile back to their apartment. They stopped along the way at a bank and pulled $100 out of the ATM, and they split the money. And between 11:15 and 11:30, Ron leaves for work. His shift started at 1, and he didn't want to be late because we all know how slow New York traffic can be. So he's like, I got to make sure, leave myself plenty of time to get there. So before Ron leaves, Sneha tells him that she's going to clean the apartment because they're hosting a small dinner party the next night. She says that she might take a walk at some point. He then kissed her and told her that he loved her. He left his keys at home, so then he ended up going back and giving her another kiss. And this is the last time Ron says that he saw her. So later, she meditates and cleans the apartment, and around 2 to 2:30, Sneha and her mom talk via instant messenger. They chat for a few hours, and then Sneha said she needed to get back to cleaning. Around 4 to 5, Sneha signs off and says that she's going to run errands, And between 5:15 and 5:30 p.m., a doorman sees Sneha walk out of their apartment, Park Place at 225 Rector Place. Park Place was a 24-story building built in 1985, and it had about 300 units. It's about 900 feet southwest of the trade centers. So Ron and Sneha lived in one of the one-bedroom units, and when Sneha left that day, she was wearing a brown dress and sandals. So then she drops off some dry cleaning and walks to Century 21, which is a huge department store across the street from the World Trade Center, just east of the Twin Towers. So Century 21, which has no relation to the bank, was a huge icon in New York where shoppers could find discounted items. So they did file for bankruptcy in September of 2020, citing the COVID pandemic like so many other stores did. They're likely not going to reopen. So Sneha was captured on the store's cameras in the women's coat area, which would have likely been on the 5th floor. So at 6:05, Sneha purchases several items, including lingerie and bed linens. And at 6:40, a source says that she made another purchase at this time, but that hasn't been confirmed. So another one of those things that we don't have a receipt or surveillance footage or anything for, but someone claims this. So the sun set at 7:13 p.m. that day, and at 7:18, Sneha buys 3 pairs of shoes in another part of the store. So she likely made the separate purchases because the shoes are in like a separate building, kind of like an annex. So she probably would have like paid for her stuff in one location before going to the other location. So same store, but kind of separate. So she did check out, twice. So sometime between 7:20 and 7:30, Sneha exited Century 21, likely on Broadway. She's carrying 2 bags with $550 worth of shoes, bed linens, and lingerie. So it has been a rainy day, and it's still raining at this time. So Ron gets home from work around 11:15, and Sneha is not at the apartment, but neither are the bags that held the items that she purchased earlier. So it doesn't really appear that she went to the apartment since she left earlier that day. So Ron said that Sneha's brother and a cousin lived close by, and sometimes she would stay the night with them. So he thought it was weird that she wasn't there, but he assumed that she just went to stay with one of them. Apparently it wasn't very uncommon for Sneha or Ron to stay at one of their friends' houses, especially if they were going to be out late, they're hanging out with their friends. Like, okay, I'll just stay here. Like, it wasn't, a super big deal. He's like, this is kind of weird, but like not completely out of character, I guess.
Especially in New York, like, you're like, I don't really want to go to the subway alone. Like, especially as a woman, like, for me personally, I'd be like, can I just stay here? Like,
Yeah, and Ron even later said that this happened, like, a few times a month because Sneha didn't like staying home alone when he worked super late, which, like, I get. And he would often work nights or evenings. So, like, it wouldn't be unusual for her to do that. But he didn't call to confirm this with her. He just assumed that's what happened and went to sleep around midnight. At 4:05 a.m., someone places a call from the apartment landline to Ron's cell phone. So Ron has no memory of making this call, but he was alone in the apartment. So Sneha never came home that night, as far as everyone knows. So he thinks that maybe he did make that call to check his voicemail to see if Sneha had left a message. So like maybe you're like half asleep and you're like, you wake up and you remember, oh yeah, she's not here, let me make this call. But then the next day you're like, did I make that call? I don't know, I don't remember.
And especially maybe you had like a dream that something happened. You're like, maybe, I've done some weird shit in my sleep, y'all. I've sleep showered. I've done crazy stuff. So it would not be unrealistic to think that I would somehow call myself in the middle of the night.
I mean, as a sleep-deprived parent of an infant, like there are many times that I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm like, where is the baby? I'm like, oh, she's in her crib. Did I put her in her crib? I don't know. How did she get there? How did I get back in bed? Like I literally could not tell you. I could not tell you. The last thing I knew, I was feeding her in her room, and now she's in her room alone, and I'm in my room. Couldn't tell you how that happened. So I get this.
Especially like as a doctor, like in your residency in New York, and you're having to have at least like an hour and a half commute, and then you're having to work. Because he said his schedule was just so, he never knew like what it would be. Like every week could be different. Like I'll be working nights, evenings, so you're probably having trouble getting any kind of sleep routine in, like who even knows. So
exactly, like if your work schedule is like all over the place like that, like sometimes you sleep, during regular hours. Sometimes you sleep from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. Sometimes you sleep from like in the afternoon. Like you're not going to be sleeping well. So like, again, it wouldn't be out of the ordinary, basically. So around 6 a.m. on September 11th, Ron got up for work. Again, like we just said, he didn't get home till 11 o'clock the night before. Now he's up at 6 to get ready for work because that's how his shifts work that time. So at 6:19 a.m., someone at the apartment gets online for about 30 seconds. And at 6:30 a.m., Ron had to be at a subway station to make a meeting at 8 o'clock at his work. So sometime between 7 and 9, according to Ron, is when Sneha would typically come home after staying with her brother or her cousin. So as he's on his way to work, he's probably thinking that she's going to be back home very soon.
Mm-hmm. And at 8:14 a.m., terrorists did hijack American Airlines Flight 11 that had taken off in Boston. Also at this time, United Airlines Flight 175 was taking off from Boston. And at 8:20 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77 was taking off from Washington. And at 8:42 a.m., a United Airlines Flight 175 is officially hijacked by terrorists. The United Flight 93 also takes off from Newark, New Jersey. So at 8:43 a.m., a security camera captures a woman in the lobby of 225 Rector Place. She lingers, then walks out the front door. And it is very heavily debated whether this is Sneha or not. So every person has like a different thing. Like an NYPD detective is like, it is her. 100% it's her. And her family was like, I don't think it's her.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's her. And this is 2001, so I'm sure those cameras weren't great either.
Yeah, I mean, the cameras aren't great now. So, yeah.
So what happens next is something that is burned into the memory of every American. I think we can all know exactly where we were when all of this happened. So we will now be discussing the World Trade Center attacks. So especially for listeners who may not be fully aware, maybe we have some international listeners who don't know, or some really young listeners who weren't born then, and they're like, I don't really know.
Yeah, like the details and
Yeah, so we are going to be talking about it. If this is difficult for you or just brings up memories, we completely understand. Please skip forward maybe 2 to 3 minutes, but we're going to be detailing that now. At 8:46 a.m., Flight 11 crashed into the World Trade Center's North Tower. And at 8:50 a.m., Flight 77 is also hijacked. So now we have 3 hijacked planes. And at 8:52 a.m., people can be seen jumping from the towers and emergency responders begin rushing in. At 9:02 a.m., Flight 175 crashes into the South Tower. And at this point, everyone knows this is not an accident. The first one, you're like, maybe something happened. But at this point, you're like, this is an attack. Like, this is deliberate. At 9:28 a.m., Flight 93 is hijacked. And at 9:37 a.m., Flight 77 crashes into the Pentagon. And at 9:59 a.m., the South Tower collapses. 18 seconds after the tower starts to collapse, a massive cloud of debris from the tower engulfs 225 Rector Place. Because again, it was only 900 feet away. Very, very close.
Yeah.
There is a call sometime later from a police officer at the location who's having trouble breathing. And if you've seen any pictures or videos from this time, like, you know how thick that smoke and debris was. So a lot of people having trouble breathing around this area. And at 10:28 a.m., the North Tower does collapse. And at 10:30, Flight 93 crashes into a field in Pennsylvania. So, of course, Ron is terrified that his wife is around the area at this time. I mean, you live so close. And he does try to call, but most phones are down and he cannot get in contact with her. So, at around 3 p.m., he hops into an ambulance and heads into Lower Manhattan. So, between 3 and 4 p.m., Ron does call Sneha's mom, and Sneha's mom says, I haven't heard from her either. So, at 5:20 p.m., which is 7 World Trade, which is a 40-story office building, also collapses. So Ron's journey into Manhattan was only like 15 miles, but it took 5 to 6 hours because Manhattan is a deadlock. I mean, there is chaos everywhere. Like, you're trying to like barricade places off, and like New York traffic is already a standstill, let alone with this.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Ron does decide to jump out of the ambulance and walk the rest of the way. And he is in scrubs, so he's kind of able to slip through the barricades because you look like someone who's helping. He said it was one of the scariest sights of his life. He said everything's destruction, everything is just chaos.
Yeah.
And at 8:30 p.m., President George W. Bush did address the nation about the terrorist attacks. So between 9 and 10 p.m., Ron does finally arrive back to his apartment, and the back door is chained shut, and the power is out, and the building had been evacuated. But there is one tenant left. So Ron's like, can you go check our apartment for Sneha? Like, can you see if she's there? But he says she's not. So Ron then goes to a high school nearby to volunteer for any help that's needed. And around 2 a.m., he leaves and walks to a friend's place in the West Village and sleeps on their couch. So on September 12th, Ron does go back to their apartment, and the doorman was going door to door checking for residents. And the doorman says in the Missing on 9/11 podcast that a piece of the plane was actually in one of the apartments, which is just crazy.
Yeah.
So Ron does go up to his apartment, and he said everything looked untouched besides just like a layer of soot. Like, it looked just like he left it. He didn't see any sign that like Sneha was there or that she'd come back. So Ron started making calls in like every one of her phone books that was sitting around, but no one had seen her or heard from her. So then they decided to start making flyers to post around the city. So her brother designed them, and they posted thousands around the city, and they made sure to note on the flyer that she had last been seen before the 9/11 attack, and it was actually September 10th when they saw her, because as you can imagine, the day after, there are a lot of people looking for their loved ones from this attack. So they're trying to be like, she was last seen before, so like it could be not related to these attacks.
Like, we didn't talk to her this morning. We don't know where she is today. Yeah.
So they had created a website too for any tips or info to go there. And Sneha's family was really trying to get media attention for her, but obviously it's a little bit of a difficult time because thousands of people are missing. Everyone's trying to figure out what happened. I mean, the news was just running everything about these attacks.
Yeah.
So it was very hard for Sneha's family to get any individual attention for her. So on the evening of September 12th, Sneha's brother John approaches a reporter and tells them they were on the phone when she was saying she needed to help someone, and he told her to leave the building, but she said no, she had to help someone, and she then ran into the buildings to help someone. So this statement was not true. He made this up, but he was just trying desperately to get someone to listen to him and get some news. So this kind of comes up a lot because he's lying about it, and like some other things, or we'll talk about it, kind of come out that he lies, but he's just really trying to get some attention.
Which, like, I mean, is it shitty? Like, yeah, but I also understand because, like you said, so many people are missing, and I can see him being like, oh, if I, like, tell everyone she was like a hero who ran into the building, like maybe they'll be more likely to look for her versus me saying she could have disappeared the day before and I don't even know that, you know?
Yeah. And an article was officially released about Sneha's disappearance on September 26th. The family had reported her missing and hired a private investigator at this time. And her family really thought she had nothing to do with the attacks, especially since she hadn't been there the previous night. Like, she hadn't been in her apartment, so they don't really know where she was or if she was even in the area. And her only connection to the towers was the proximity she lived. Like, a lot of people, like her family was like, she never really went there. Like, she really had no reason to. Many articles were written after this, as well as many television appearances from Sneha's family. So Sneha's family pushes hard on the NYPD because they think something could have happened to her before 9/11, and they don't want her just like grouped with the victims of the attacks. They're like, can you like focus on her aside from the 9/11 attacks? Because like she could be out there like hurt somewhere. And eventually they did uncover the credit card purchases, and Ron's the one who got the footage of her at Century 21 that like we talked about earlier. And there is something weird about this because the timestamp on the video says 4:57 p.m., But the police say Sneha left her house between 5:15 and 5:30. So kind of a discrepancy here, but it could just be like the camera's clock was an hour off. Like maybe it forgot about daylight savings time, or maybe the police's timeline is a little off. But it's not also like a huge red flag that it's a little bit off.
Yeah, and it's not like it's like 12 hours off or anything either. You know, it's like an hour difference here.
Yeah, and then after she made her last purchase with the shoes, there's no other trace of her and no other credit card purchases. So Sonia Mora is a shoes saleswoman at Century 21, and she does claim to remember ringing up Sneha on September 10th, and she says Sneha was with someone, another woman. However, Sonia's story does change quite a bit. So in one version, she says Sneha was with another woman who was an Indian woman and appeared to be a friend. And the two women told Sonia that after buying shoes, they might go to the lingerie section, presumably in the Century 21. And in another version, Sonia said Sneha might have been with another woman. So now she's like, I don't know if there was another woman there or not, which your first story seems pretty elaborate for it to be like, she wasn't there.
You're like, oh yeah, she was with another woman who was Indian, and they bought this, and then they said they were going here, and then now she's like, maybe she was with another woman. It's like, okay, did you remember this interaction or not? Because that's very different.
Yeah, and these are obviously two different versions. And on the website that John had created for Sneha, it reports that Ron had spoken to a saleswoman who helped Sneha and said Sneha was with another woman who was possibly Indian, so likely this woman. And she said the two women were headed to Victoria's Secret in Jones, New York. However, this is never mentioned again, so we don't know if it's true. I mean, if this is true, this could be one of the only clues we have as to where Sneha went after last being seen at the Century 21. So John Walzak is the host of Missing on 9/11. Guys, please go listen to this podcast. It's amazing. He does so much. Any little lead, he goes digging, and this is one that he actually went digging on. So he was trying to find out in 2001 where Victoria's Secrets and Jones, New York were near each other. So there was a Victoria's Secret in the mall that was below the World Trade Centers, but there was no Jones, New York store here. So the only place where these two were close was in Midtown, so the women would have had to travel there. So kind of like, would they travel at 8 p.m. on a rainy day with all these bags? Like, would they get on the subway to go to these places, you know?
When it's not like, as far as we know, they weren't shopping for some specific thing. They're like, oh, they didn't have it here, so let me go try this. It's like, oh, we're just out shopping, you know, which is, I feel like a very different situation than like, oh, I need this very specific thing, so I'm willing to try all these stores that I have to like travel to, versus just, oh, let me just browse this area, whatever's nearby, see if there's anything I like, you know, kind of a different scenario there.
Yeah, and especially like, who knows when these stores would have closed too? Like, would they have been able to make it there? And like, why wouldn't you drop your stuff off at your apartment that's a 5-minute walk away instead of carrying $550 worth of stuff onto a subway? Like, so it is kind of strange. Sneha's family does report they have no idea who this woman could be, so there was no record of Sneha calling her to like meet up, or even like any friend existing that could meet this description. And even if Sneha just ran into her while out shopping, like, why wouldn't this woman come forward saying she'd seen Sneha that day? And I think that's kind of the big thing too, is no one's coming forward like, Sneha stayed with me that night, or I saw her, you know. If she was with her, why wouldn't you be like, I saw her, she said she was going here, or she stayed with me, or just anything at all.
Yeah, definitely. So on September 14th at 11 p.m., Ron filed a written complaint with the NYPD triggering an official investigation into Sneha's disappearance. So Ron really didn't believe that she died in the towers during the attacks. He's like, I think that something happened to her before this. And Detective Richard Stark was assigned to the case. He tried to review all of the security footage and get everything together. He asked Ron about the phone call made to his cell phone from the landline in his apartment. And again, Ron had no explanation. He just assumes that he sleep dialed. But, this is a very critical detail. So it's like, like we talked about earlier, it definitely makes sense. But it's like, once you start really thinking about it, can you remember, okay, yeah, now I do remember that I did that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But also, if you think about something enough, can you convince yourself you did it when you really didn't? And then it kind of goes both ways.
And think of everything that happened between that phone call and him trying to figure out why it happened. Like, oh, my wife's missing. My apartment is full of debris from the biggest terrorist attack America's ever seen that happened 900 feet from my apartment. Like, and I'm a doctor who's trying to help people. Like, that's hard. And, like, memory is shitty enough already.
Yeah. But Detective Stark believes that Sneha was in this apartment when the call was made. And there is the surveillance video of the woman in the lobby of the apartment on the morning of 9/11. And again, NYPD and this Detective Stark really think that this is her. He did say that Ron changed his story a few times, so he doesn't know if he's lying. He believes that it could have been possible that Sneha did actually come home that night. Detective Stark doesn't believe that Ron had anything to do with her disappearance. He says that he came into the precinct frequently. Like, he keeps trying to find out, what happened to her. Like, he's really pushing them to continue investigating. So it's like, if you killed your wife and it's assumed that she died in the terrorist attacks, why would you pursue this? Why would you put out these flyers? Why would you push the department? Like, why would you do all of these things if you could just easily be like, okay, there's an explanation, I can stay with that,
There's a lot of things in this case that I don't know what I believe, but I know for one thing, I think Ron had nothing to do with it. Because he was like, I'm filing a complaint to make you investigate this. I'm making all these flyers. I'm coming to talk to you. Like, he did push them. Like, if he had done it, I feel like he could have been like, she probably did run into those towers. Like, she was home that night. She was about to leave. Like, she said she was leaving the house, like, right around that time. Or if she'd seen that, our training tells us to go help. Or I definitely think he wouldn't have pushed as hard, like, if he'd done it.
Yeah, I agree. So on October 30th, 2001, Detective Stark ends his investigation into Sneha's disappearance. He's like, there's nothing left to do. Like, we've pursued every lead. It's just, there's nothing out there to look into anymore. But Sneha's family disagrees. So they have their private investigator keep looking, but he's not really finding very much either. Then on January 16th, 2002, a judge issues a bench warrant for Sneha's arrest. So if you remember, on the morning of September 10th, she had a court date that ended up being pushed back, and since she didn't show up to court and there's no official report of death, he's like, I have to issue this bench warrant because I don't know if you're dead, so we have to do this.
Yeah, he's like, I have no choice. Like, the law says I have to.
Yeah. And 1 month later, Associated Press releases an article theorizing that Sneha ran away to avoid personal and legal problems, but her family doesn't agree with this either. So on the anniversary of 9/11, Sneha's family holds a small memorial service in Poughkeepsie for Sneha. So they've mostly given up that she's going to be found alive, even though some of them believe that she could still be. But they do bury an urn with unidentified ashes from Ground Zero. And a month later, Ron files a claim with the 9/11 Victims Compensation Fund, which is worth around $3 to $4 million. But because Sneha is not an official 9/11 victim and there's no death certificate, they do deny her claim. So her family is now convinced that she likely did die in the attacks, that she ran into the building to help people, like we said before. They don't really care about the money, but more of her legacy. Like, they want her to be remembered for her bravery if that's what happened. However, the city of New York is refusing to issue a death certificate, saying that this is what happened to Sneha.
Yeah, and I think too is it got to a point where Sneha was very close with her mom, and she's like, she wouldn't just run away and not talk to me, Yeah. So she's like, And I think everyone has to cope in their different ways. And they're like, she probably would have run into help. And, you know, you're going to believe that because you're like, I want her to be remembered as a hero.
Yeah, absolutely. So on September 25th, 2003, Ron files a petition seeking a judicial declaration of death. So by 2003, both NYPD and Sneha's family are on the same page, all agreeing that she did likely die during the 9/11 attacks because, again, nothing has come forward since then. I mean, there's no evidence that she's anywhere else. Like, no bodies have been found elsewhere. I mean, if she, you know, we'll talk about this later, but if she had been murdered before or right after this or whatever, her body wouldn't be in this debris. I mean, there are people that were never identified because of the amount of destruction. But if you were murdered somewhere else, your body probably could have been found. I mean, there's just a lot of questions. But at this point, they all believe that she likely did die in the terrorist attack. However, Ellen Winters was appointed to represent Sneha in her absence, and Ellen is saying that Sneha lived a, quote, dangerous lifestyle because she was known to go to bars and lesbian bars. Ooh. So we all know if you're out at a lesbian bar, you're just so promiscuous. I mean, clearly it's just this dangerous lifestyle where so much could happen to you. Please hear the sarcasm dripping from my voice. So Ellen's insinuating that maybe Sneha was meeting people out here, that she was being unfaithful to Ron, that there could be an alternate explanation that, like, she went to a bar and met someone who ended up being a murderer. And Ellen's take is that they can't rule out foul play. So everyone, Sneha's family's lawyer, NYPD investigators, everyone's like, this idea is just absolutely crazy. I mean, this can happen, but, like, you need proof that, like, just the fact that she went to bars sometimes isn't enough to lead to she went out to a bar that night and met someone that murdered her. That's just a very big jump. Like,
yeah, and I feel like we probably say this later, but I mean, you're probably safer at a lesbian bar than you are at, like, a normal bar.
Yeah, for real. Like, yeah. And again, you know, she very well could have been murdered, but to jump to this specific conclusion of she met someone at a bar who murdered her because she sometimes went to bars, it's kind of elaborate.
Yeah, and there's no, like, evidence for that. Like, you're just literally grasping at a straw because there's, like, nothing that points to this at all. Because you're telling me then that she went to a bar and, like, this is a story that's getting attention and no one at that bar is like, I saw her that night. Like, nobody, no bartender, there's no record of her spending money, like, nothing.
Exactly. And if you listen to the podcast that we've mentioned several times already, Missing on 9/11, they do have voice actors that reenact this hearing. So this is in episode 9 called Testify. So if you want to listen to this very detailed court hearing, you can do that in that episode. So the court did grant the declaration of death, but they put her death date as 3 years after her disappearance. But like we mentioned earlier, her family doesn't believe that she would have just walked away and, like, not contacted anyone, especially her mom. So Sneha's family is really unhappy with this because, again, they want her to be included with the 9/11 victims because they feel that she died a hero going in to help people. So they did appeal the date of this death declaration. So then speculations about Sneha's sexuality began when John told Detective Stark that he had walked in on Sneha having sex with his girlfriend. So John later denies ever having said this, but when this came out, obviously the tabloids just ran wild with these stories. People close to Sneha did say that she did have relationships with both men and women. There are also reports that Sneha had affairs. Her marriage to Ron was not an open one, and Ron was not on board with them having multiple partners. So, you know, in the end, Sneha's sexuality is only hers to identify. Like, she's not here to tell us how she identifies. We're not going to speculate. But we do feel that some of these statements from people who knew her are important to include here. So, if you remember at the very beginning, we mentioned that she had that court date on September 10th due to an incident. So on June 21st, 2001, Sneha went out with coworkers to a bar. And at the bar, she said one of her male supervisors followed her into the bathroom, forced himself on her, and tried to kiss her. She said that she shoved him away, and at this time, this doctor and his wife lived in the same apartment building as Ron and Sneha. Like, they actually lived on the same floor. So, according to the NYPD, on the night of this alleged assault, Sneha went back to the doctor's apartment, pushed open his door, sat on his couch, and refused to leave. So, the next day, after filing an official complaint, she allegedly called the doctor's wife 3 times, despite repeated requests that she stop calling. So, a few days after that, Sneha called the doctor 5 times at work. Finally, on June 26th, which is 5 days after the incident, Sneha recanted. She told a detective that she was not sexually assaulted, and after she recanted, she was charged with 1 count of second-degree criminal trespass, 2 counts of second-degree aggravated harassment, 1 count of third-degree assault, 1 count of third-degree falsely reporting an incident, and 3 counts of second-degree harassment. So the NYPD arrested Sneha, and she spent 1 night in jail, and her family says that she was just really struggling after this whole ordeal. Prior to her disappearance, she did appear to be having some mental health issues. She was talking to a therapist and was on medication, and once she disappeared, Ron even checked like certain mental health facilities. Like, did she check herself in? Did something happen to her and someone have her checked in? You know, possibilities.
Yeah, did she have like a breakdown just like on the street and someone just like called for help and like got her sent there and no one knew who she was?
Yeah. However, most investigators and Sneha's family agreed that they don't believe that this happened. They don't believe that she died by suicide. If she had, it was likely that her body would have been found. I mean, even, you know, if someone like jumps off a bridge, usually those people, like, their bodies are found. You know, you don't just disappear. Again, you can't really hide your body after a death by suicide. So it's not like you could make sure that your body was never found, you know?
Yeah, it seems like they would have found her if this is what she had done.
And again, murder by stranger isn't the best explanation either. Like we said earlier, there's no proof of her going to a bar. Like Courtney said, probably more safe at a lesbian bar anyway than a straight bar. And it really seems, you know, unlikely that a serial killer or, you know, another random murderer just happened to find her on the streets of New York right before 9/11. I mean, nothing's impossible, but it doesn't really fit with everything else, you know? You know, random acts of violence are unlikely anyway. Statistically, you are more likely to be killed by someone you know. So the next possible theory is, did someone she know kill her? Because, again, we know that these stranger murders are not super likely. So, as we always say, the husband is always suspect number 1. But, again, as we mentioned earlier, Ron really doesn't seem very likely. He might not be telling the full truth about everything, but it doesn't really seem like he killed her. Like, maybe he's trying to hide the fact that she had an affair. Maybe she was bisexual and he didn't want that getting out there. You know, some of these
things. Maybe they were fighting. And he's like, well, I don't want to say that some of the last moments we had together were fighting, you know.
Yeah. But again, if he had murdered her and, you know, your city is attacked the next day and thousands of people are killed, why would you push so hard to have her death looked into when you could just say, oh, yep, that was it, you know?
And it's New York City. Like, it's not like you have a lot of places you can bury her body or not be seen doing something. Like, I think, again, like, I don't think if he had murdered her, he would get away with it because, like, where would you put her body? If you dumped it somewhere, someone's going to either see you or, like we said, like, in the rivers, they say, like, bodies usually do turn up or, you know, like, there would be some evidence in the apartment that something happened, but there's none of that.
And we know for sure that she was alive around 5 to 7 p.m., at which time he was at work. I mean, that's very easy to confirm, you know?
Yeah.
And he did fully cooperate with their investigation as well. So 2 other possible suspects are the doctor that Sneha accused of sexually assaulting her, and Sneha's younger brother, John. So Sneha and the doctor, like we said, used to live in the same apartment building and on the same floor. But by September 10th, Sneha and Ron had moved. So they didn't live close together anymore, and NYPD did not consider this doctor to be a suspect in her disappearance or death.
And John lived only about 5 minutes from Century 21, which is again why Ron thought Sneha had just gone there after she went shopping. So, as we said before, Ron did lie quite a few times, as well as during the investigation. You know, he lied on TV when he said he spoke to Sneha, which again isn't damning evidence. You could just be trying to get someone to listen to you about your missing sister. John also said multiple times that Detective Stark did not interview him, but NYPD records prove he did. So there was at least a phone interview on September 29, 2001. And also, when Sneha disappeared, her and John were on bad terms and they had been fighting. So John kind of gave some conflicting answers about when he last spoke to Sneha. So in the September 29th interview, he said they last saw or spoke 6 weeks prior, which would be around like July 18th. But in court later, he testified that he saw or spoke to her 2.5 weeks prior, around August 25th. And then in an interview with John Walzak, the host of the podcast, he said he last saw her 8 or 9 days before 9/11. So around September 2nd or 3rd. So this is a little suspicious that you keep changing this date. Like, I think we have maybe seen that before, where if people are guilty of something, they'll like try and keep the truth but lie a little, you know, like,
Yeah.
but maybe he genuinely does not remember. Like, maybe he's like, you know, it's kind of different in 2001. People didn't really text as much or call as much, and you know, you might just not remember. We didn't all have Apple Watches that we checked the date 50 times on our wrists. So,
And especially like if they, you know, live close by where you may just, you know, pop over to see them or, you know, things like that, where it's not like a big event. It's not like something that you like remember. It's like, oh yeah, like I think I saw them a couple weeks ago. Like, I don't know, time is hard to keep track of. Like, especially when you're just like in your normal like work life routine, you're just like, I don't know, it was, you know, like last week. And then like I'll look at a calendar, I'm like, oh, that was like 6 weeks ago. I don't know. Like,
it's like
I
now
get
where
that.
I'm like, oh, 2021 is almost over. Aren't we still in February? John also had some conflicting details about the days leading up. But honestly, you lose your sister and the Twin Towers are attacked very close to your apartment. Your memory's not going to be the best. Like, you're going to have some, like, PTSD from that.
Yeah.
He also said that he never told Detective Stark that he saw Sneha and his girlfriend having sex. And he had no explanation for how this information came to be. So I don't really know. Like, can't imagine Detective Stark just making this up. Like, I mean, officers do some, like, shady shit, but that's very specific to make up. Obviously, lying isn't great, but again, I don't really think there's any hard evidence against John. Like, he acts weird, but maybe he did see her, isn't wanting to say it, but maybe you're just, like, trying to hide something else and not, like, murder or foul play. Again,
Yeah.
So, if neither suicide or murder foul play kind of add up, what about the idea that she just ran away from her life? So, this theory got a lot of traction. I mean, a lot. Once a certain postcard was sent into Post Secret. So, if you were a teen in the 2000s, 2010s era, you probably know what Post Secret is, but if you don't, it was this website, and you could mail a postcard to a man named Frank Warren, and each week he would update the website, and you could anonymously share your secret with the world. I loved this as a teenager in high school. Every
Same.
Sunday I was there. Refreshing to read people's secrets.
Yep.
And Post Secret was a huge success, and there's even books. Frank Warren got multiple book deals out of it, and actually the music video for Dirty Little Secrets by All American Rejects also features secrets from Post Secret. So pretty famous. So basically a postcard had come in that had a picture of the towers. It was kind of like drawn, maybe with like some charcoal and like a black and white style of the towers burning, and said, "Everyone who knew me before 9/11 believes I'm dead." So that'd be pretty, that kind of adds up.
Yeah.
So it was first published on March 4th, 2005. This date is important because in June 2006, a huge article came out about Sneha and got her case attention again. So if someone had sent this after the article, you could probably be like, oh, someone's inspired by this and they're kind of making up a secret. You know, like someone could just be inspired by this story and be like turning this in. But the fact that it was like during kind of a time where she wasn't being talked about as much is like, oh, could it be?
And you know, it was after the 2003 when they gave her the death declaration, but before this, so it's like...
It's like in that kind of sweet spot of like, could it be? So, like I said, the postcard kind of appears to have been drawn by someone using either a graphite pencil or soft charcoal. And if you do remember, Sneha did want to be an artist, and she did take time off from medical school to practice art. And many of her friends and colleagues remember her sketching often. So, I mean, if you're going to disappear, 9/11 attacks can get you a good out. It does seem very hard to completely disappear without a trace. And there was a report of a man saying he did see Sneha and that he saw a woman and she had a strong Indian accent, but Sneha did not have an Indian accent. She had mostly grown up in the US, so she didn't really have that strong of an accent. And on January 24th, 2004, NYPD got an alert that ongoing activity associated with Sneha was connected to an address in Los Angeles. So they're like, is she out here? So a new investigator was on the case, and he'd asked officers with the LAPD to go to the address. So was she here? Was she alive? She was not, but this is now where Ron lived. So the alert was a false alarm, and he had moved back to California in July of 2003 to try and get a new start. So the new detective again asked Ron about the call the night of September 10th in the apartment. So they're still like pushing this, like, what's up with this call?
Yeah.
Ron thought for a while and said, I must have just been distraught and called my cell phone to check my voicemail. Like, I can't come up with anything else about this. So another discovery is there is a LinkedIn account associated with Sneha's email in the UAE. So this is strange because LinkedIn was not founded until 2003. So this couldn't be one of her old LinkedIn accounts. But the profile had no activity and no friends. So it could just be possible there's another Sneha with a very similar name, or it could just be a database error. So it's not anything like, we found the big reveal. Also, data does show that men are far more likely to fake their own death rather than women. But it does actually seem like the ones who are caught are more men. So we don't really have data on people who aren't caught. So maybe just as many women do, but they just aren't caught.
I mean, that would make a lot of sense because I feel like when it comes to like details and stuff, a lot of men are just oblivious. Like they'll, oh yeah, like whoops, I accidentally used my credit card, so now there's a trace of me on that, or you know, things like that.
Yeah, and that is the hard thing with like knowing about people who faked their death or like whatever. It's like, well, we only know the people who are caught. So we don't really know how many people out there successfully get away with it because unless you make a deathbed confession, we don't know. And on January 31st, 2008, Sneha's mom did get an email, and her daughter is officially declared a 9/11 victim. So in a 4-1 vote, the New York State Supreme Court Appellate Division ruled that Sneha died in the World Trade Center. So this did overturn the decision from Sneha's death certificate that stated that she hadn't died on 9/11. There was like no foundation. That didn't seem like a good explanation. Like, you know, they were saying, no, she's just dead. It wasn't that. So this did overturn that. There are still holes in this theory. I mean, it's not as airtight as, honestly, any of them. I mean, any of these. So, again, there's no proof she was anywhere near the trade centers. No one saw her run in. And there's a lot of photographs and videos from this day, and Sneha's not seen in any of them.
And we know she didn't come home that night. So, she was last seen out shopping around 7 p.m. These attacks happened the next morning. Where was she? If this is what happened, whoever she stayed with, why didn't they come forward and say, Sneha was with me, she left at this time to go to this place, or I thought she was going home, and, things like that. Like, why has no one ever come forward? Like, where did she stay that night? Like, the attacks didn't happen until the next morning. So, if this is true and she did run in to save someone, where was she all night? Why has no one ever come forward about that?
Yeah, and I think it really depends on if you believe that woman in the surveillance video at her apartment is her or it's someone else. So if you do believe it's her, then you have her in the vicinity and it adds up. But if it's not her, where is she? And where did she stay? Where's all the stuff she bought? Like, where is it? It doesn't...
And, did she come home and Ron's not saying that for some reason? Or, I don't know.
Yeah. So there are 2,753 victims from the trade centers, and about 60% of them have been identified, mostly by DNA, fingerprints, personal items, tattoos, etc., which kind of makes me think a little side story. I did read this book about one of the medical examiners who worked in New York City, like, around this time, and she was mentioning how some people were identified by, like, their wedding rings being, like, engraved, which led me to be like, Kevin, I think we should engrave our wedding rings, because what if something happens to us and they find my ring and they find, like, something in it only I have that can identify me? Anyway, tell me you watch too much true crime. Because Kevin's like, what are we gonna put? I'm like, I don't know, I'll put, like, our initials or something, like, just something.
This is
like,
Courtney.
Small.
This was Courtney's.
I'm Courtney Irwin Ebert. Anyway. And so overall, only 2% of the first responders who died in the trade centers were volunteers. And firefighters were also on the scenes like 4 minutes after the attacks, and soon others followed. So she would have been a doctor with no supplies running into these buildings. So she may not have been much help. And she probably would have been redirected to like a triage location. Like if firefighters saw her and she's like asking to like help people, they probably would have been like, please go over here and help, where we have a location set up. So if you're running into this like thing and you have nothing on you, there's only so much you can do to help people. Yeah. People also speculated she may have been shopping in that mall underneath, but only 1% of people on the lower levels died. And 73 minutes passed between the plane hitting and the tower collapsing, so it's unlikely she would have stayed after the plane hit. So, I mean, after the plane hit, you're, like, evacuating as many people as you can. You're unlikely to be like, I still have to shop in this store. Like, you're going to be leaving.
Yeah, and 73 minutes, I mean, if it was, like, 20 minutes, I could maybe understand because it's hard to get that many people out at once. But I feel like over an hour, you would have been able to get everybody out by that point.
Yeah. And people also think she could have been hit by debris or jet fuel. I mean, she was very close, but only 18 people were bystanders or occupants of nearby buildings, and that's about 0.007%. But also, if she was on the street, why wouldn't they have found her body? Even, if she's a bystander in her apartment, And most victims were taken to the hospital if you were, like, a bystander who was hit. So, of course, again, we're saying it is possible, any of this, but if you can see the statistics, make it very unlikely. I mean, we have a 2%, a 1%, and a 0.007% of people that she could have been a part of. And 9/11 is also known to be one of the most photographed and recorded events in history, but most are from a distance. So John Walzak, again, doing the most, being the best out here, actually spent time looking through a lot of photos and videos to try and find a trace of her. And he even eventually decided to try and use AI to help and identify Sneha in any 9/11 pictures.
If I can this has been a very serious episode, and Yeah, not that we purposefully try to insert jokes, but I just have to tell you this because it's really funny because Courtney did the primary research for this episode, so I'm reading through it last night. And at first I was like, who is Al? I don't know who Al is. We haven't mentioned
she's
Al yet.
either going to think it's Al or A1. Like A1 steak sauce. I was like, which one is she about to say?
Because I read it first and then I was like, what? And I was like, AI, I got it now. Okay. So I did put it together, but at first I was like, who the hell is Al? Like, anyway.
You don't know Al? He's just like...
I thought everyone knew Al. I didn't need an explanation.
That is something I probably would do. I would just put like Al and mean to go back later, and I wouldn't.
But if you thought that I was going to say A1 steak sauce, like... We just got these pictures, and you just pour A1 on it, and it just appears. It's like this...
It's magic. It's a magic trick.
Okay.
So, they did try to compile photos from all known sources, and they did actually find a few unpublished sources of people who had pictures that hadn't been, like, officially published anywhere. Mm-hmm. So how it's done is very technical. There was a lot of big words and and I'm not an expert. I'm not going to try to explain it. Again, go listen to the podcast after this. You'll get so much more info, and they'll explain it, the experts. So basically, they slowly start to narrow down, like, the threshold of results, like the amount you're going to see. So you kind of start very small, and then you kind of start, so that you eventually know that you're going to be getting some false positives that are going to be manually reviewed. You're trying to make it work. It's all very technical, but... In the narrowing of the results, no matches ever came to Sneha, like, through the algorithm or through the manual review of things popping up. And there was 100 gigabytes of data, and it was about 2,170 videos and photos in or near the trade centers. So that's a lot. AI did detect 470,000 faces, which is pretty impressive, but none of these faces were Sneha's. So there is no any of that. So John also tried to see if he could use AI to see if Sneha's face has been detected after 9/11. This is very ethically questionable, and he does address this, and he's like, I did not want to work with this company because this can be used for bad things. But he thought if he could find any picture of Sneha, it's worth it. So he did run 7 different photos, so like old photos of her, and there is an age advanced photo that shows what she could look like now. And there were some results, but none of them were Sneha after 9/11. So basically what we have is her case boils down to 4 major theories of what could have happened. So we have suicide, we have murder / foul play, that she died in the 9/11 attacks, and that she started a new life. And there's many sub-theories within these 2 about what happened to Sneha, and every single one is as unlikely as the next. People have theorized that she overdosed and the person she was with panicked and hid her body. I don't even think we have any bitey saying that she had a drug problem that wasn't outside of recreational use, Some say she was staying in the Twin Towers that night with someone, or that whoever she was staying with died in the attacks, and that's why she didn't come forward. I could see that. Of whoever she was staying with, but then again, is she also in the towers? Some people say that her friend had a wedding coming up in the Twin Towers and that she wanted to go look at that, but you just happened to go look at that, and the wedding wasn't for 6 months, so you just happened to go this one day. They're all kind of far-fetched. It's all possible, but none of them line up. And ultimately, it's hard to know what exactly happened to Sneha. But her family does believe she died a hero running into the towers to help with the 9/11 attacks. And her name is actually listed at the memorial on Ground Zero in New York City. So I don't want her family or some of her friends to listen to this and hear us being like, oh no, it didn't happen. Because I do think it's likely it could have happened. And maybe it is possible she started a new life because, that postcard's pretty weird. Who sent it? Was it from? But also it's hard to start a new life and get away with it with no trace. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
I don't want...
there could have been other people that, maybe didn't have as strong of family ties that, also made a new life after 9/11, but it wasn't like someone was looking for them. So, like, that could have,
Yeah.
That could have made sense. It could have been a completely made up secret.
It could have been made up. I mean, someone
fun.
could have seen an old article about that and been inspired somehow. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you guys will have to let us know what you guys think. I definitely think suicide doesn't add up. I think we would have found her. Murder, foul play, I see very unlikely. Or if so, her murderer is so damn lucky.
Yeah.
So damn lucky. And I don't think anyone's that lucky. So you guys will have to let us know, like, what you think. If you have any other, like, crazy theories. I mean, I know people on the internet go crazy with the theories around this case.
Yeah. And as always, make sure and be respectful in, discussing this with anyone, online or in person or whatever, because this is someone's loved one. So some of the theories that are just so far out there that really have no basis, it's like, okay, like, it's one thing to talk about, what could have happened, but to kind of make stuff up to be like, oh, well, could it be this, like, very specific scenario that there's nothing that leads to that being the case, I feel like, going in some way dying in the attacks is probably the most likely scenario. It just doesn't, like, where was she the night before? And even, like you said, and in the possibility that that person died in the attacks as well, and that's why they didn't come forward, okay, but, I mean, she was most likely staying with someone that someone in her life knew about, whether it was her husband, her brother, her mom. If you were just staying with a friend overnight, like if your friend that you see every so often died in the attacks, your husband would be like, oh, maybe she was with this friend, like, even if...
And they called everyone in her phone book, and they're like, have you seen her? So, I mean, maybe she could have been having a relationship with someone else. I don't know why you would just, like, stay there, and maybe that's why the person's not coming forward, but I mean, at this point, it's been so long. Obviously, Ron would just rather, like, no, what I mean?
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's just weird. I definitely think 9/11 is the most likely. I think it's one of those where it's like, it adds up the most because you do live so close. You have been around so close to it. I think the most, like, fairy tale one is that she's off having a new life somewhere, where she's, like, an artist in Italy. Like, I would love that for her so that she would still be alive somewhere. But I also just don't think it's possible. I mean, especially, like, if you did start a new life, like, after 9/11, like, flight restrictions, all that, like, you'd have to somehow get a new ID, a new passport, a new birth certificate. You'd have to get all of this stuff that's just... I don't think it's possible to start a new life unless you somehow just live on a farm somewhere and make no money. I don't know.
Or, I mean, like you said, prior to 9/11, that would have been more likely. So did it happen? Did she do something so quickly after 9/11 that these new policies that we all know now weren't in place yet?
Or did she fly out on September 10th? Did she leave the night before, and then it was like, hey, no one's really paying attention anymore? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Again, which would just be so lucky if you were gonna run away, though. That you're just like, that's lucky. So,
and again, this is a wild out there theory. We're not speculating that this is probably or even remotely likely to what happened, but tons of possibilities that it could have been. Yeah,
so that is the story of Sneha Anne Philip. I found it so interesting, and it's just so much we know, but so much we don't know. Like, we have such a detailed the day before, and then it just stops, and nobody knows. So definitely let us know what you think. But yeah.
Yeah, so that being said, Courtney, what is your perk of the week?
My perk of the week is I have a new obsession. Oh. And it's going to be something I drink all the time throughout winter. And it is hot chocolate with peppermint schnapps in it.
Yum.
It is so good. So, as I said, my throat's been not cooperating the best. So, I was having some hot chocolate to try to have something, like, warm. And then I was at my parents' house, and they were like, you want to put some peppermint schnapps in it? And I was like, yes, I do. And it's, like, the perfect, like, peppermint chocolate mix where it's like not overpowering and it just tastes so good. And I'm going to be drinking it probably every day until Christmas. But
that sounds
delicious. It's so good. If you want a good holiday drink, go do that. It's like easy, it's cheap, so good. But that is my perk of the week. Jacqueline, what is your perk of the week?
My perk of the week is also holiday themed. So we finally did our Christmas decorations today. So we got our tree all up and all the ornaments and all the other fun stuff. I still have to do outside because we don't have an outlet out there. So I got to figure out some system for getting my my lights plugged in and working and all that good stuff. But, it was also fun, decorating with my baby for the first time, even though, she's not much help and she kind of just got in the way and made it more difficult. But, but, it is fun to be able to experience these, first moments with her and, have the house all decorated. And it definitely feels, and it's cold, outside. So it's, feels very holiday in the spirit now. So that's my perk of the week.
We're getting our tree probably tomorrow because we got to kind of like set some stuff up in here before we get it all going. But we've had our Christmas decorations outside up for a little bit. So I'm excited. I love Christmas and it just feels happy. So
yes, it does. If you want to tell us your perks of the week, if you've decorated already, if you have not, if you don't celebrate Christmas, what you do celebrate, what those decorations look like. Do you not have decorations? You know the drill. Just tell us
what's
all
your
the things.
Hanukkah decorations? What's your Kwanzaa decorations?
Yes.
Let us know.
Yes, send us pictures. We love that. Please send us pictures of your holiday setups. You can do that on Instagram at Caffeinated Crimes Pod, on Twitter at Caff Crimes Pod, that's CAFF Crimes Pod, on Facebook at Caffeinated Crimes Podcast, you can email us at caffeinatedcrimespod@gmail.com. We are on YouTube, we are on TikTok. Again, if you want to leave us nice comments because other people don't, you can go to...
It's Caffeinated Crimes Podcast on YouTube, and I think it's just Caffeinated Crimes on TikTok. No one's mean on TikTok, so it's fine.
Yes. And if you feel so inclined, you can go to patreon.com/caffeinatedcrimes, where you could get some bonus episodes, where you can hang out with us, join our Discord, get some quarterly gifts and stickers and pins, and there's all kinds of fun options to choose from, whatever you are able to give that helps us make this podcast the best that it can be. Again, you can do that at patreon.com/caffeinatedcrimes.
Yeah, and if you want to get a pin and a sticker without paying any money and also get a $10 gift card, go ahead and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. That's a little purple app on your iPhone. If you don't have an iPhone, I'm sorry, I don't think you can do it. But if you just go there, leave us a 5-star. If you'll write a comment and just say something nice, it doesn't have to be like groundbreaking. You could just be like, love you guys. If you want to put like a long heartfelt thing, we'll really appreciate that too, but you don't have to. If you could just send us a picture of that or like put some identifying like name in that we can like link to you. Once we get to 50, we're very, very close. That's all I want for Christmas is you guys to give me 50 reviews.
Yes.
Then once we get to 50, we will pick someone. They'll get a pin, a sticker, a $10 gift card to the coffee shop of their choice, any of the ones you want. So please do that. Hopefully we can get that by the new year.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, but in the meantime, go have a cup of coffee.
And don't commit a crime.